Greetings. Today is the 21st of April. Rather pivotal date, another pivotal anniversary upon us. Actually, the very thing that got me fired up to get my own place and space on the World Wide Web. I tried blogging a couple of times before, but clearly I wasn't ready then. But when DeepWater Horizon happened, something really got triggered in me and made me just want to say, stop. Essentially, that's been the focus of my messages in the blog has been backpedal, because to me, DeepWater Horizon was a huge tell of what runaway technology looked like. Of course, I had no idea that it was a mere precursor to Fukushima. And my own personal level of frustration at both of these is deeply and extremely high. Now, I have one very strong connection with nuclear energy in that my birthday is the 6th of August, which is of course the same date as Hiroshima. It's very strange that in all my trips to Japan, I never worked it up to go there. Always felt the pull and never made the time or the energy to go there, even though I feel it all the time and every year. So yesterday was when DeepWater Horizon happened, and tomorrow is when it started to really go and start putting oil into the Gulf of Mexico. And the entire story around DeepWater Horizon is rife with so many holes, just like 9/11. And there's a brilliant man called BK Lim. He's a geohazard specialist, and he's done these amazing reports. And I'll give a link to it in the link that I provide with this talk, dialogue. I hope it's a dialogue. I hope it triggers enough inner questions in you that at least offline and atemporally we are speaking. So BK Lim has given these really stunning insights into what really went on, and then other sources, etc., and people that I've been in touch with, like Dr. Tom Tremoto of Florida Oil Spill Law. The story they know and tell and the story that is generally known are so far apart, just like everything else we know. Just like everything else we know. So one very interesting concept for the time, and it brings in something that I've been brought up with and it's in my bones, but is luckily a well-known enough concept globally, is Maya. And Maya is commonly understood as illusion. But then there is only one group says that the illusion is reality and vice versa. So Maya it is. So we are living in a time of clearly extreme Maya, where whoever is plugged in enough into the grid actually spends the better part of their day, including me, in Maya, to the detriment of our life outside. We have plugged into the illusion. So the truth of anything and the way we think we know it and the view of the people who genuinely understand it are as far apart as they can be. So DeepWater Horizon was a great lie, and it's continued to spew, just like Fukushima has continued to spew. So these two great free energies, there was a point, if you look at some of the early exploration videos, when you struck it, it just gushed out at you. You didn't have to pump anything. Oil just came gushing out. And America, besides slavery and the slaughter of the locals and whatever else that they did to power themselves into this position that they are today as slaughterer and chiefs of the world, their boom, and it's literally, why is it called a boom? A boom is pretty destructive, right? But in the world of oil, everything is a boom. Everything starts with a boom. Everything is exploded out of the earth somewhere. Dug out, exploded out, and now especially exploded out because the dugout phase is long gone. So it was free energy for the US, and because of the petrodollar and all of the drama that happened between the first well being drilled and the Second World War, and then the geopolitical world that we've had ever since, has given America literally free energy in the form of refined gasoline products. Now, when they conquered the atom, they needed some place, or who knows why. I mean, if you look at Fukushima, and this is all intimately related, by the way, if you start thinking about life in these, sort of big wheels or big, the jellyfish tails all twirling together in one giant, generally coherent direction, then oil is what enabled nuclear. I mean, nuclear could only come around when machinery had reached a certain stage and phase of evolution. So first oil, which had been in use for millennia, by the way, but we clearly have some explosive memory of it. That these last 150 years, we've had boom after boom after boom. And of course, in between all of these booms has to be busts. So to my English mind, again, both boom and bust are bad. One is an explosion and one is a collapse. Whereas creativity happens with implosion. And I could completely take off into a tangent on Victor Schauberger and what happened to him, and talk about a man ahead of his time who's been completely wiped off the history books. where water came through this man and said, I will power you. Literally, I'm not dramatizing or exaggerating. This brilliant man who had patent after patent in the technological world says he got it all from sleeping next to the river when he was the forest warden in Austria. And that the river took him in and took him into the molecules of water so he could understand what a unique substance it is. So water came up forward in the form of Schauberger and said, I have it. But of course, he was killed after he did a ton of work for Hitler. Had to. Concentration camp. The Russians raped him. The Americans finally killed him, essentially, by taking this Austrian forest warden and putting him in a hot desert town in Texas where he just said, I'm wilting. And they harangued him and took all of his papers and all of his machinery and everything. So oil squashed water. But that was the first call of the age of Aquarius. And you have to take a look at Victor Schauberger's picture and understand, look at the energy of the man and what he tried to bring and how he was hounded off and killed. Even before him, or around the same time, the new electrics came in the form of Tesla. And Tesla had gone far beyond what damage these Newtonian monsters of the Manhattan Project managed to do in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1905. But of course, again, oil, JP Morgan, energy, the explosive, the boom people, cut off his funding, tore down his tower. And nobody knows really. There are all kinds of stories on whether he died a miserable pauper or a rich wasted man, just talking now, never did any work after a point later in his life. And just today, and maybe by the general wave of memory that is flowing from that time and that date, Earth Day, April 22nd, when it started spewing, that there are photographs all over the news today about Gulf of Mexico seafood. And of course, everybody's tiptoeing around the truth and saying, we can't draw conclusions yet because there are lots of other pollutants in the Gulf of Mexico, which in and of itself is an ironic reason if you think about it. But such is where we are, and thus is how it is. So, and more echoes are happening. History is starting to repeat itself very rapidly from my reading of it. And it's almost like it's coming on a beat. So most people in the rush of the news and everything that got reported about the Gulf of Mexico and DeepWater Horizon, everybody forgot that the church sex scandal, the Vatican sex scandal, had a huge peaking on April 15th, 2010. And a lot of groups had suddenly come forward, and there was talk about lawsuits, and I think Archdiocese of Boston was heavily involved, and it has been, and Ireland, something was starting to come out, and there's a lot of anger building up. And then that anger all went towards, because it was probably the first global catastrophe in some sense, that everybody recognized and realized that something has happened. And just today in the news again, we have the Vatican and the general church sex scandal back in the news about people asking for some trials to move forward and, things like that. So, in some weird sense, we are lucky that we can just look back to shortly previous history in our own memory and figure out at a macro level, what we should be ready for. So, a very interesting, extremely tangential and yet completely connected person and theory that was clearly brilliant and again hammered down by the establishment and connected to oil in this bizarre way and water is a man by the name of Immanuel Velikovsky. These are the forgotten giants of our time because honestly speaking, the 99% is fast asleep. The 99% pushes these geniuses into corners where they just have to go and fight against the establishment. The larger populace can't hold and nurture its geniuses, it seems. All three examples that I've given you and I'm giving you are testament to that. It's really sad because then you look around and you say, why are we in this terrible position? In every aspect of our lives, medicine, engineering, food, home. What are these cement cast steel boned buildings that are all nowhere ready for what the earth is clearly showing in terms of shaking or starting to shake? I look around me in Bangalore and they're sprouting up like fungus. And I would bet maybe 0.02% of them meet any kind of core basic earthquake proofing engineering in them. So people say, why are we here? Why is, everything is suddenly poisoned? But of course, a collective buy-in that allowed this system to grow to the degree that it has. I really like David Icke's term regarding this. He calls it the totalitarian tiptoe. And I think you can use the tiptoe analogy for pretty much everything. And people are asleep. So Immanuel Velikovsky, who was a medical doctor, and again a very interesting parallel to Keshav Bhatt, Dr. Keshav Bhatt, who was a botanist. He was a trained medical doctor and in Russia. And, clearly a brilliant mind and was heavily into psychoanalysis and somehow or the other landed up in the US and at Princeton ultimately, as it turns out. But he wrote a book. By the way, he was a confidant and a friend of Einstein's and was basically telling Einstein in every discussion that they had over a year and a half, they co-authored a journal, that, dude, you're wrong. I'm sorry, but you see these things that I'm saying, they'll be proven true. And your entire theory, which is based on only two things, gravitation and I think momentum. But no magnetics and no electromagnetics is going to prove completely incapable of answering any of the deeper questions that we are coming up to as a species. And he was proven right. The conservation of momentum. So basically a Newtonian picture of this extremely non-Newtonian reality that we live in is what Velikovsky told Einstein. And 9 days before Einstein's death, it was proven that Jupiter was sending out an electrical signal. which Velikovsky had predicted. So this book that he wrote, called Worlds in Collision, essentially gave this absolutely fantastic theory that, the birth of the solar system is much newer than we think it is. And just a few thousand years ago, there were streamers of energy and all kinds of material flying between the planets as they re-established some new orbit set and energetic hole that kept it stable. And that Venus was a piece of Saturn that came pretty much flying through the solar system, upsetting Mars, upsetting the Earth twice. And that in the comet tail of Venus, which drenched the Earth and rained down some huge particles, contained hydrocarbons. And Velikovsky predicted that the atmosphere of Venus is super hot and will have hydrocarbons. And he was pretty much cut off from the establishment. He was called a kook, a crazy guy. And of course, within his lifetime, thank goodness, they found hydrocarbons in the atmosphere of Venus. And they found that, they first came and said that, oops, you know what? The surface temperature of Venus is 800 degrees Fahrenheit. And Velikovsky said, you know what? It's actually even higher. And shortly thereafter, the second flyby, and I forget the name of the NASA probe that went there, it was 900 degrees Fahrenheit actually, the hottest that they could find. So hydrocarbons via Venus and filaments of water from Saturn to the Earth. Of course, it sounds fantastic, unbelievable. But what he did was that he went and studied the Diluvian and the antediluvian and the post-diluvian stories of all the myths all over the world. And they all describe the solar system as being far more active than the story that we've been given, which also Keshav Bhatt's insight has turned into another whole drama. That, all conventional science is basically tottering because it was built on a dominant paradigm that has driven our existence ever since Newton, especially and specifically Newton. And the curse of the apple. That's pretty bizarre. You think about this, and this is a little funny and a little hyper weird. That the biblical story, and again I truly believe that we are living the biblical life, whether we like it or not. That the biblical story begins with the bite from the apple, basically changing, deepening or crudifying, who knows, man's existence forever, which was an apple. Then an apple falls on Newton's head. Heck of a story, huh? And of course we all believe it, just like Washington and the cherry tree. Liar man. But yeah, he cut the cherry tree. So, the big bite from the apple. Apple falls on Mr. Newton's head, and thus begins our enslavement to gravitation. And then the big apple becomes the center of global finance, and Apple, the company that with its logo and the one bite out clearly harks back to some biblical reference, and of course their famous 1984 ad, is the darling of the Big Apple, Wall Street. And what's the most common saying that everybody knows? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Whereas I heard from very good authority, the good authority was a gentleman farmer who was one of those classic success stories that came from a village, came to Bangalore, wanted to do something, washed dishes, got to owning a small restaurant, and then the moment he could, he sold it all and he bought a piece of land and he started tending it. And fascinating, I should tell you one little thing about this gentleman and what he said. So he was giving this lecture in a forum called Beautiful Minds, and he was shining. He's 75 or 80 years old, maybe even older. And he looked more vital than any of us city folk. And now he owned large tracts of land and all being organically farmed along with, everybody around. And he's been feted with prizes and taught he's taught other people, his methods and whatever. Beautiful man. Amazing talk. And the thing that stuck in my head was he said, you know what? You all believe the wrong things. And he said, apple is the biggest poison for your system. He said, the only people who should be eating apples because of the amount of energy and the kind of energy that an apple contains are people at high altitudes near whom apples grow. And this eating for your geography is actually a very, very sensible thing anyway to begin with. But he said this with such, and interestingly, I've always had problems with apples. So it made me feel very happy and very sad for everybody that is chomping at their apple, thinking it's keeping the doctor away. Because I wish I could remember his name, but anyway, if what he said was right, then the apple's no good. So apple. And so it's been the millennia of the apple and the century of oil. And electricity has tried to show its head through Tesla and was banged down. And water tried to show its hand through Schauberger and was banged down. But I think the time, there is no more. Everybody needs to really step up. Really step up. I mean, today should be such a reminder of how asleep we've all been at the wheel and allowed ourselves to be driven, herded, whatever, to this place where we are completely instruments at effect. Completely instruments at effect. I mean, here in India, all I see is people wanting to conform, so that they might get up this pyramid. I see the pyramid more like a Jenga stack actually. And everybody's trying to pull the tile out from under the next guy, even though you know that it's all going to fall in the end. So a lot of threads, they coalesce on these key dates. I mean, it's not Earth Day for nothing. It's the transition from Aries to Taurus, the bull, from the ram to the bull. Both powerful earth symbols. So what are we all going to do? Sorry. I think I just swallowed a fly. Wow. Bizarre. I am vegetarian, so it makes me a little uncomfortable. So what are we going to do? How do you unplug the system from yourself? Or yourself from the system? Because it only lives on demand. If something huge happens on the demand side, where everybody throttles back their consumption, this beast will die. It's a chimera of Ponzi this and fraudulent that. All built upon a house of cards, floating on a sea of lies. One of the few perils of walking at sunset. Tons of insects in the air. I hope this doesn't come across too loud. But how about that? Immanuel Velikovsky, look him up, because the worlds have been in collision before and they will be in collision again. And a very good sense tells people that it happens right around the 2600 year mark, which just so happens to be the precessional period. Right? The age of Aquarius. Schauberger was like a precursor to show us the possibilities. Anyway, I have some more concrete thoughts than this, and I'll share them with you soon. But I do want to put this thing out for remembering. By the way, remember. It's a very interesting word when you really separate it. Remember. Sometimes if the word itself doesn't leap out at you, you look at what the logical opposite should be. The opposite of remember is dismember. So what is remembering? You're merely bringing back some part of yourself. So remember DeepWater Horizon and know that it is still spewing. It's cordoned off like a crime scene. If there's nothing to hide, there should be nothing to hide. And look around you in your, in your city, in your town, in your state. You can find them all over the web. These men and women doing things differently and willing to teach. If only somebody came and asked. And a big part of that would be to backpedal a little bit, so you can take a breath. And this, by the way, precisely is why astrology is an undeniable science, far more precise in a pulse-taking way because the only thing that it does is it acknowledges the power of these celestial bodies over us directly, constantly. So with that, and maybe quite a few things to think about, I will say, or maybe I'll play and then I'll say. It's been a longish talk, no. Right at the 40-minute mark again. Pretty. Till next time, namaskar.